Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
How to prevent identity theft. In the studio now is Ann Wallace, president of the Identity Theft Assistance Center. Ann, thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you.
So the numbers for identity theft are staggering. More than 8 million people were victims of identity theft in 2006. Why has this crime become more prevalent over the years?
Well, you know, the numbers can sometimes be deceiving. It's not clear that identity theft is really any bigger problem than it was in the past. But whatever the numbers are, you don't want to be a victim.
And there is a false sense of misperception out there. If you're thinking that you could not be a victim of identity theft, you're sort of in la-la land because anyone is a potential victim, correct?
That's absolutely correct. You don't have to be rich. Identity theft is sort of an equal opportunity crime. It's often a crime of opportunity. You can be young, you can be old, and you're still vulnerable.
Who's responsible for these crimes? I mean, most people think that they're kind of computer-savvy geniuses that are kind of sitting behind their computers, toiling away, trying to get your information. But you have a more interesting theory that the perpetrators may actually be closer to home than you realize.
Our experience shows there's really two kinds of identity crime. There's the crime of opportunity, and there are the criminals who do this for a living. I mean, if you think about all of the people who may have access to your information, it can be, you know, the 20-year-old kid who wants to buy a car and victimizes his grandmother to do it. So that's a crime of opportunity, and often identity theft seems like, well, it's not violent crime, and so people don't feel maybe quite the restrictions that they might in other kinds of crime. But that's not to say that there are not some very serious criminals involved in this. The Identity Theft Assistance Center works very closely with law enforcement. That's a major part of our mission. And what law enforcement tells us is that, you know, increasingly there's this connection between identity theft and other kinds of very serious crime, whether it's gangs or drug trafficking, prostitution, pornography, things like that. So it can be a very serious crime.
Is it true that most identity theft cases happen in the workplace? I heard that an overwhelming majority of these identity theft instances occur in the work environment.
That hasn't been our experience. I mean, certainly these crimes can happen a whole variety of ways. You know, your wallet can be stolen, your purse can be snatched, information can be compromised in a variety of ways.
Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but let's go to the phones right now. We have John on the line from Kent County. John, go ahead. Hello, John.
Yes,
are you there?
I'd like to ask your guest, should we be giving our Social Security number to anyone who, certainly not to anyone who asks, but should we be giving it to anyone but the U.S. government? Anyone
but the U.S. government. Interesting question. All right, thank you. They already have it from your...
Well, it's a great question. I mean, there are situations in which you do have to provide your Social Security number,
right,
and some of them don't involve the government. For example, if you apply for employment, your employer needs that information in order to report your income to the government. And there's other kinds of situations, whether it's in school or other settings in which you do have to provide your Social Security number. But I think the caller's absolutely right that you should think about it. You should say, well, you know, why do you need it and what are you going to do with it before you hand it out?
And should you feel comfortable at some point saying no? Because I often say, I'm not going to give you that information. I don't see why you need it.
I often say no to requests for information. People ask me for my home address, for my phone number, for my zip code, for all kinds of things, and I say no.
Yeah, it's not necessary.
You don't need it.
So the person who is stealing your identity, what exactly is their primary goal? What do they hope to do with that information? Because this crime, as you mentioned earlier, can take on many different forms.
It really can, and sometimes it's very surprising what people will do with that information. Some of the 30,000 people that we have helped at ITAC have been victimized in connection with health care. I mean, it's hard to imagine that someone would get health care under your name. But it's true, because if you have insurance and they don't, they will try to impersonate someone who has insurance. Sometimes people use a false identity to commit other crimes. You know, if they get stopped by the police, they give out false information.
But primarily they want to take it because they want to either open up another credit card, or they want to buy a car, or they want to try and get a home, or they want to leverage your good credit or your money for something else. Is that the primary reason?
There's money involved someplace here, and they'll open new accounts in your name, order goods, have them delivered to a drop address, things like that.
What about the cost of identity theft? Because we often hear the cost is in the billions in terms of consumer losses. What does that mean? I've never understood what exactly that means. How does that translate to me, average Joe consumer?
Actually, it's almost impossible to get an exact number because identity theft, as we've just discussed, takes so many forms. It can be healthcare fraud, it can be insurance fraud, mortgage fraud, a whole range of issues. What we find in helping victims is that most of them do not suffer serious out-of-pocket losses. I mean, they will be reimbursed by the bank or by the credit card issuer. But some people do suffer losses. I mean, it's usually the businesses that end up
paying the price.
Paying the price.
And the victim as well. Let's go back to the phones. Are lit up here. We've got Doug on the line from Harford County. Doug, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I'd like to note that when you send out job resumes or job applications, usually the employer will simply reject them if you don't include your Social Security number according to their demand. But they don't need that information until they're at the point of actively considering you if they need to do a background check, or even until you're actually hired for tax purposes.
So Doug, let me ask you, do you not fill out your Social Security information on an application?
Well, it's a catch-22. I'm losing my privacy giving it out to somebody. You send out hundreds of resumes before you get one interview, let alone a job.
Right.
Why should you have to disseminate this information to strangers? In fact, the state of Maryland will not consider your application unless you put the Social Security number on it, and they just don't need it at that stage.
All right, good question. Do you not have to put your Social Security information on applications, job applications?
I think the caller has a really good point about, sometimes even with the best intentions in the world, people are asking for information that they really don't need at that particular time. Right. So if you push back and say, do you really need it? What are you going to do with it?
And see where it goes from there. Let's talk a little bit more about ITAC.
Sure.
You were formed by a group of banks and organizations. I mean, what is your primary purpose in terms of helping victims of identity theft?
Right. The Identity Theft Assistance Center was founded 4 years ago. We are a not-for-profit organization that was founded and is funded by large financial services companies, many of whom, operate in Maryland. You'd recognize Bank of America, BB&T, and Wachovia, and so forth. They founded ITAC to help their customers who became victims of identity theft. And we run a victim assistance center where we have helped more than 30,000 customers of our member companies restore their financial identity.
It's only available to members of certain organizations right now, but will it eventually be free to all victims of identity theft?
It is a terrific service. It is free to customers of member companies. Today, our goal is to make it available to all consumers.
What can a person do to protect themselves from identity theft?
There's a lot of really obvious and fairly straightforward things that people can do. As our callers have discussed, one thing is giving out information. To whom do you give out? Who do you give out that information? Give it to people that you trust and you understand what they're going to do with it. One of the other things that's really important is checking your records, looking at your bank statements, looking at your credit card statements when they come in the mail. Don't just throw them in the drawer.
And real quickly, if you're the victim of identity theft, what's one thing you should do, the first thing you should do if it happens to you?
Call your financial institution.
And let them know what's going on.
Absolutely. Let them know, because they will work with you. They will really help you figure out what's going on here.
Okay.
And start you on the road to recovery.
Absolutely. Great information, Ann Wallace. Thank you so much for coming in and talking about identity theft. We could go on for hours and hours, but hopefully we provided some good information to our viewers. All right, thanks so much.